The person who speaks first has already lost, not metaphorically, biologically. The moment you react out loud, you've revealed the exact pressure point that controls you, and the other side just filed it away for later use. Every confrontation you've ever lost wasn't lost on the words. It was lost in your bloodstream, seconds before you opened your mouth. You just never had the vocabulary to see it happening. So today, no tactics, no scripts to memorize, just the actual machinery behind why some people stay unreadable under pressure, while everyone else leaks information with every twitch of their face. Here is the uncomfortable truth about conflict. Nobody actually fights with words. Words are the delivery mechanism. The real battle happens in a chemical exchange most people never learn to control. The instant you perceive a threat, a raised voice, a public accusation, someone testing your composure in front of others, your brain doesn't ask permission. It fires a signal from the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland, which tells your adrenal glands to release cortisol into your bloodstream within seconds. This isn't weakness, it's design. Cortisol sharpens your senses, mobilizes energy, and prepares you to respond. In small, controlled amounts, it's the reason a skilled negotiator becomes more precise under pressure instead of less. But most people never learn to control the dose. They let the flood run unregulated. And that's the exact moment they become readable. Cortisol doesn't act alone. It has an accomplice, noradrenaline, fired through your sympathetic nervous system the instant confrontation begins. In small amounts, this compound sharpens focus. In excess, it does something far more dangerous. It starts shutting down the exact part of your brain you need most. That part is the prefrontal cortex, your center for reasoning, patience, and strategic restraint. Under a noradrenaline flood, the prefrontal cortex loses its grip and control transfers to the amygdala, a primitive alarm system built for one purpose only: survival, not strategy. This is the biological explanation for every outburst you've ever regretted. Every time you said something you couldn't take back wasn't a failure of character. It was a hostile takeover of your decision making by a structure in your brain that was never designed to negotiate, only to fight or flee. And here's what separates the person who dominates a room from the person who gets dominated in it. Whoever keeps their prefrontal cortex online the longest wins. Every time, without exception. Your body isn't defenseless against this hijack. It has an internal brake system most people never learn exists. A peptide called neuropeptide Y is released to counteract the noradrenaline flood, suppressing its release before it can drown your reasoning capacity. People who appear composed under pressure aren't suppressing panic through sheer effort. Their internal brake is simply doing its job. Alongside this, a second compound, DHEA, is released in parallel with cortisol. Where cortisol strains your system, DHEA protects it, shielding your memory and decision, making centers from the corrosive effects of prolonged stress. Researchers studying operators in extreme survival training discovered something precise. It wasn't raw toughness that separated those who stayed sharp under interrogation, level stress, from those who fractured. It was the ratio of DHEA to cortisol in their bloodstream. This is the part almost nobody understands about composure. It was never a personality trait handed out at birth. It's a chemical proportion, and proportions can be trained. Every person who has ever tried to provoke you is running a simple diagnostic. They say something designed to spike your cortisol and flood your noradrenaline, and then they watch your face for the exact millisecond your prefrontal cortex loses control. That millisecond is the entire game. Once they see it, they know precisely which lever moves you, and they will pull it again in every future negotiation, every future disagreement, every future silence. They need you to break first. People who seem impossible to read didn't learn a facial trick. They trained the actual chemistry underneath the face. so there was nothing to read in the first place. This is why the loudest person in the room is rarely the one who wins it. Volume is what a nervous system does when it's already lost containment. Silence, real silence, not the performed kind, is what a nervous system does when it never lost it to begin with. When people face real psychological pressure, public confrontation, betrayal, high-stakes negotiation, they split into three categories, and understanding this split changes everything about how you see conflict. The first group collapses. They fracture under the exchange, replaying it for days, letting one confrontation rewire how they see themselves. The second group survives. They absorb the hit, recover, and return to exactly where they started, unchanged, unimproved, simply intact. But there's a third group, the ones who walk out of confrontation operating at a level they didn't have walking in. Sharper reads, steadier delivery, a recalibrated sense of what actually deserves a reaction and what doesn't. That third outcome has a name in the research: growth through adversity. And critically, it is never accidental. It is trained deliberately through repeated controlled exposure to pressure. This is the actual secret behind people who seem unbothered by conflict. They weren't born detached. They were built through repetition, the same way a blade is built through friction. The US military didn't leave this to chance. They built a program across more than 1 million personnel specifically to install this composure deliberately. Because on a battlefield, the person who reacts first often doesn't get a second chance. The core target of the entire program was a single mental habit: catastrophizing. The automatic assumption that the worst possible outcome is the only likely one. This single reflex is the root of almost every panic reaction. Every premature confession, every outburst that hands your opponent the exact leverage they were fishing for. They trained personnel to intercept that reflex in real time, to take the automatic thought, "This is a disaster," and consciously convert it into, "This is a variable, and variables can be worked." That single conversion, threat into challenge, is the entire mechanism behind unshakable composure. The results were measurable. Catastrophizing dropped. Emotional stability climbed. The capacity to stay adaptable under unpredictable pressure increased. Not because these people stopped feeling pressure, but because they stopped letting pressure make their decisions for them. Here's what almost nobody in a confrontation understands. The first reaction is never the real answer. It's just the leftover residue of an untrained nervous system firing before the thinking brain catches up. The person who stays quiet for 3 extra seconds before responding isn't being weak or slow or intimidated. They are running a completely different operating system, one where the prefrontal cortex gets to finish its calculation before the mouth opens. This is why interrogators, negotiators, and highly effective operators are trained never to fill silence. Silence isn't empty. Silence is where the other person's nervous system starts working against them instead of for them. The one who cannot tolerate quiet will eventually speak just to end the discomfort. And whatever they say in that moment is almost always the truth they meant to protect. You don't need to say a word to win. You need your opponent to run out of patience with their own chemistry before you run out of yours. There's a reason this skill compounds faster the earlier you train it. The prefrontal cortex, your entire command center for restraint and strategy, continues developing into the mid-20s. Younger nervous systems are more adaptable, more capable of rewiring the pathways that govern reaction. But this isn't a closing door. It's a door that simply requires more deliberate effort to open later. Composure trained at any age reshapes the same circuitry. It just asks for more repetition to get there. Every rep matters. Every controlled exposure to pressure. Every time you catch yourself about to react and choose the 3-second pause instead, is quite literally rewiring the exact chemistry that decides whether you win or lose the next confrontation before it even starts. The people who seem impossible to shake in any room weren't gifted with different biology than you. They simply stopped letting their biology run unmanaged. They regulated the cortisol instead of being ruled by it. They trained their internal brake instead of relying on luck. They intercepted catastrophic thinking before it could hijack their tongue. And over time, what looked like natural dominance was never natural at all. It was engineered, one controlled exposure at a time. This is what real psychological power actually looks like. Not raised voices, not clever comebacks, not winning arguments in front of an audience. It looks like a person who has already processed the threat internally, before anyone in the room even noticed a threat occurred. The next time someone tries to provoke a reaction out of you, remember what's actually happening. They're not testing your intelligence. They're testing your chemistry. And chemistry, unlike character, can be trained with precision. You don't need the last word. You need the last calm breath before anyone else in the room finds theirs. Master that, and you'll notice something strange. You'll start winning conversations you never even needed to speak in. The battle was never in the words, it never was.